There is something I need to tell you before we go any further. What I am about to share with you is not just another idea about success or motivation. It is a principle, a quiet law that has been operating in your life long before you ever noticed it. Many people sense it exists, but very few truly understand it. And the reason is simple. Once you understand this law, you can no longer pretend that life is random. You begin to see that much of what you experience has been quietly shaped by something within you. That realization can be uncomfortable for some people, but for those who are ready, it becomes the doorway to real freedom. You see, most people grow up believing that the world outside of them is the cause of their life. They believe that circumstances decide their happiness, that other people determine their opportunities, and that luck or misfortune shapes their future. So they spend their days reacting to what happens around them. When things go well, they feel hopeful, and when things fall apart, they feel powerless. But there is a deeper truth hidden beneath all of this. The outer world does not begin outside of you. It begins within you. Your mind is not just a place where thoughts pass through like clouds drifting across the sky. Your mind is a creative field. Every thought you repeatedly hold becomes a signal. Every emotion you nurture becomes a frequency, and the world around you responds to that frequency with remarkable precision. Not because the universe is judging you, but because it reflects what you consistently embody. This is the quiet secret that has echoed through spiritual traditions and philosophical teachings for centuries. Reality is not merely something that happens to you, it is something that mirrors you. Imagine for a moment that your consciousness is like a lens through which life is projected. Whatever color that lens carries will tint everything you see. If the lens is filled with doubt, then doubt seems to appear everywhere. If the lens is filled with fear, then the world appears threatening. But when the lens begins to carry gratitude or calm certainty, something remarkable happens. The same world begins to look different. Opportunities that were once invisible begin to appear. Conversations flow differently. Even the smallest moments begin to feel more alive. The world itself may not have changed, but the field through which you experience it has shifted. Now here is where the real secret begins to reveal itself. Your inner state does more than color your perception. It influences the experiences that come toward you. Attention has a peculiar power. Whatever you continuously focus on seems to grow. When you constantly think about what is missing in your life, your mind becomes trained to notice absence. It becomes skilled at finding evidence that confirms the idea that something is lacking. But when you begin to place your attention on what is already present, something else begins to happen. Your awareness expands. You start seeing possibilities that were always there but never noticed. Think about the last time you were completely absorbed in worry. Your mind replayed the same thoughts again and again. You imagined problems before they happened, and the more you focused on them, the more real they felt. Your body reacted as if those imagined events were already unfolding. Now imagine directing that same intensity of focus towards something constructive. Imagine holding the feeling that life can unfold in your favor. Imagine carrying the quiet expectation that something good is forming even when you cannot yet see it. That shift alone changes the way you move through the world. And the way you move through the world begins to shape the events that move toward you. But there is another piece to this secret that many people overlook. The universe does not respond strongly to casual wishes. Everyone wishes for something from time to time. People wish for success. They wish for love. They wish for peace. Yet those wishes often disappear as quickly as they arrive. What truly shapes experience is not a passing wish, but a sustained state of being. The feelings you live in each day quietly define the signal you are sending into life. If you wake up each morning with the quiet certainty that life is always working against you, the world will eventually produce situations that confirm that belief. Not because the universe intends harm, but because it mirrors the expectation you consistently carry. This is why awareness is so powerful. The moment you become conscious of this principle, you realize that your inner world deserves far more attention than you have ever given it. Your thoughts are no longer harmless whispers drifting through your mind. They are seeds. Your emotions are no longer temporary reactions. They are currents that influence the direction of your experience. And the identity you carry about yourself quietly becomes the blueprint through which your life unfolds. Now I want you to consider something very simple. If your inner state shapes the way life reflects back to you, then every moment becomes an opportunity to choose the state you live from. You are not required to wait for perfect circumstances before you feel peace. You are not required to wait for success before you feel confidence. Those states can begin inside you first. And when they do, something subtle but powerful begins to shift. The world gradually reorganizes itself to match the vibration you consistently embody. This is the doorway that so many people pass by without realizing it exists. They search endlessly for solutions in the outer world while ignoring the source within them that quietly influences everything they encounter. But once you step through this doorway, you begin to notice patterns you never saw before. You begin to recognize that the thoughts you nurture today often echo in the circumstances of tomorrow. You begin to see how emotional habits slowly sculpt the landscape of your life. And most importantly, you begin to understand that you are not separate from the creative force shaping your experience. You are. The secret is not hidden because it is complicated. It is hidden because most people never stop long enough to observe their own mind. They rush through their days reacting to events without noticing the inner patterns guiding those reactions. But when you slow down and look inward, something extraordinary becomes clear. The story of your life is not being written somewhere far away. It is being written quietly within you through the thoughts you repeat, the emotions you cultivate, and the beliefs you accept as true. And the moment you truly see that, the idea of being powerless begins to dissolve, because the pen that writes the next chapter of your life has always been in your hand. Before you go any further with this idea, I want you to pause for a moment and consider something that may sound simple at first, but becomes profound once you truly understand it. Your life is not being written somewhere outside of you. It is not being decided by distant forces that you have no influence over, in ways you may not have realized until now. You are the author of the reality you experience, not in some dramatic, mystical sense, but in a quiet and continuous way that unfolds through your thoughts, your assumptions, and the meaning you give to the world around you. From the time you were young, you were taught to believe that reality is something solid and fixed. You were told that the world exists independently from you and that your role is simply to react to it. If circumstances are good, then you feel good. If circumstances are difficult, then you struggle. In this model of life, the outer world always leads and your inner world follows. But what if that model is incomplete? What if the relationship between you and reality works in the opposite direction more often than you think? Think about how your mind works throughout a normal day. Your thoughts are constantly interpreting what you see. Every event is filtered through your assumptions. When someone speaks to you, your mind instantly assigns meaning to their words. When something unexpected happens, your mind labels it either opportunity or problem. These interpretations happen so quickly that you rarely notice them, yet they quietly shape how you respond to everything. Over time, those responses begin to influence the direction of your experiences. In other words, the story you tell yourself about life slowly becomes the story you live inside of. Let me explain it another way. Imagine that your mind is like a scriptwriter working behind the scenes of a film. The scriptwriter determines the tone of the story long before the actors appear on stage. If the script describes the world as hostile and unpredictable, then every scene will reflect that tone. Characters will behave in ways that confirm danger or conflict. But if the script describes the world as supportive and filled with possibility, then the scenes unfold very differently. The same setting can produce entirely different outcomes depending on the script guiding it. Your consciousness works in a similar way. The assumptions you repeatedly hold act like the script that shapes the scenes of your life. You may have noticed this pattern in small ways without recognizing its deeper meaning. When you approach a situation expecting rejection, you often behave more cautiously. Your body language tightens. Your words become hesitant. The other person senses that tension and the interaction becomes awkward. Eventually, the conversation may end in the very rejection you feared. When that happens, it appears as though the world proved you right. But what really occurred is more subtle. Your expectation influenced your behavior. Your behavior influenced the environment, and the environment responded in a way that matched your expectation. In this way, the story inside your mind quietly guided the outcome outside of it. Now consider the opposite situation. Imagine approaching a new opportunity with the calm belief that something positive can emerge. Your posture changes without effort. Your voice becomes steadier. You listen more openly and respond more naturally. People feel at ease around that energy. Conversations become smoother, and unexpected possibilities appear. Again, the outer result seems like luck or coincidence. But in truth, it is often the natural extension of the inner state you carried into the situation. When you begin to observe life through this lens, a powerful realization emerges. The way you assume reality to be often becomes the very framework through which reality unfolds. This is why awareness of your assumptions is so important. Most people move through life repeating the same internal narratives without ever questioning them. They assume that opportunities are rare, that success belongs to others, or that happiness is fragile and temporary. These assumptions settle quietly into the subconscious and begin guiding behavior in subtle ways. Decisions become limited by those beliefs. Risks are avoided. Possibilities are dismissed before they are explored. Over time, the outer life begins to reflect the boundaries of those inner assumptions. The world appears to confirm what the mind has already accepted as true. But here is the empowering part of this realization. If your assumptions help shape your experience, then they are not fixed rules imposed on you by reality. They are patterns within your consciousness that can be observed and gradually transformed. The moment you recognize that your inner narrative is influencing the direction of your life, you regain something many people feel they have lost. You regain authorship. Instead of reacting automatically to circumstances, you begin to ask deeper questions. What story am I telling myself about this situation? What belief is guiding the way I see this moment? And, most importantly, is that belief helping me create the life I truly want to live? Becoming the author of your reality does not mean controlling every detail of the world around you. Life will always contain elements that remain unpredictable. Other people have their own choices and circumstances continue to evolve. But authorship means something more fundamental. It means recognizing that the tone of your life begins within your consciousness, the interpretations you choose, the beliefs you nurture, and the expectations you carry influence the direction of your experience more than you might have imagined. Once you begin to understand this principle, your relationship with life changes. Instead of waiting for the world to provide evidence before you feel confident, you learn to cultivate confidence first. Instead of waiting for success before you believe in your ability, you allow belief to guide your actions. The inner state becomes the starting point rather than the result, and as that inner state stabilizes, the outer world gradually begins to align with it in ways that may appear surprising at first. This is the deeper meaning behind the idea that you are the author of your reality. Your thoughts are not random background noise. Your assumptions are not harmless opinions. They are the quiet architecture shaping the story you are living. Every day you are writing new lines in that story through the states you accept as true about yourself and the world around you. When you become conscious of this process, you realize that the future is not something you must passively wait for. It is something that begins forming within the field of your awareness long before it appears as physical experience. And the moment you recognize that the pen has always been in your hand, you begin to write your life with a very different level of intention. There is another principle you must understand if you truly want to see how reality begins to organize itself around you. It is simple, yet incredibly powerful. Your attention acts like a magnet. Whatever consistently holds your attention begins to grow in your experience, not because the world is trying to reward or punish you, but because attention is the energy that feeds every idea, every fear, and every possibility in your life. Wherever you direct it long enough, something begins to take shape. Most people believe attention is harmless. They think of thoughts as passing moments that have no real impact on the structure of their life. But the mind does not work that way. The mind becomes trained by repetition. What you repeatedly notice becomes what your mind learns to search for. Over time, this process quietly influences what you perceive, what you expect, and how you respond to the world. In other words, attention is not passive observation. It is a form of participation in the creation of your experience. Let me tell you a simple story so you can see how this works. In a small coastal town, there lived a young woman named Lulu. Every evening, she would walk along the shoreline, watching the ocean move slowly under the fading light of the sun. Couples often walked past her holding hands and laughing quietly as the waves rolled toward the sand. Each time Lulu saw them, she felt the same thought rise within her mind. Why am I always alone? The question repeated itself day after day. She would return home and write about her loneliness in her journal. filling pages with thoughts about how difficult it was to find companionship. From her perspective, she was simply being honest about how she felt. But something deeper was happening beneath the surface. Without realizing it, Lulu had trained her mind to focus on absence. Every time she stepped outside, she noticed signs of loneliness. When a friend cancelled a plan, it confirmed her belief that people were drifting away. When she saw couples enjoying their evening walks, it reinforced the feeling that connection existed for others but not for her. Her attention continued feeding the same idea again and again. Over time, that idea became the lens through which she viewed her entire life. Opportunities to meet new people appeared less visible to her. Invitations felt uncomfortable because they seemed unlikely to change anything. The world she experienced slowly organized itself around the feeling she had been nurturing. Now listen carefully, because the important point here is not that Lulu wished to be alone. In fact, she wanted the opposite. She longed for companionship and warmth. But the mind does not respond strongly to what you wish for occasionally. It responds to what you consistently focus on. Lulu was focusing on loneliness with powerful emotional intensity. Her attention was strengthening the very condition she hoped would disappear. The universe was not ignoring her desire. It was simply reflecting the signal she had been sending through her attention. In that same town lived a painter named Benny who had struggled for years to sell his work. His small studio was filled with canvases that few people ever saw. For a long time, Benny felt discouraged and frustrated. He believed the world was overlooking his talent. But one quiet morning, something inside him shifted. Instead of focusing on the absence of recognition, he began to pay attention to something different. He noticed the way morning light entered his studio window and illuminated the colors on his palette. He felt grateful for the simple ability to create images that had never existed before. Day after day, he allowed his attention to rest on these small moments of appreciation. Something subtle began to change in his work. The energy he brought into each painting felt lighter and more alive. People who visited his studio noticed the difference even if they could not explain it. Conversations about his art began to spread. A gallery owner eventually discovered his paintings and offered to display them. Within months, collectors began purchasing the very canvases that had once gathered dust in the corner of his room. From the outside, it looked like luck had finally arrived. But Benny understood that the transformation began long before that moment. It began when he redirected his attention from frustration toward appreciation. You see, attention is the gateway through which energy flows. Whatever you observe with strong emotional focus becomes amplified in your experience. If you constantly examine problems, your mind becomes skilled at detecting more problems. If you repeatedly notice signs of failure, your awareness sharpens around evidence that confirms failure. But when your attention learns to recognize possibility, gratitude, and progress, those qualities gradually become easier to perceive. Your mind becomes an instrument tuned to a different frequency. And once that tuning shifts, the world begins to reveal different opportunities that were always present but previously unnoticed. This principle also explains why resistance often strengthens what you want to escape. When you constantly fight against something, your attention remains locked onto it. Even though your intention is to remove the problem, your focus continues feeding it with energy. The mind does not easily distinguish between attraction and resistance. It simply responds to intensity of attention. This is why people who endlessly worry about avoiding failure sometimes find themselves surrounded by situations that feel like failure. Their attention has become magnetized to the very outcome they fear. So what does this mean for you? It means that awareness of your attention is one of the most practical forms of power you possess. Each day, your mind moves from one thought to another, from one observation to the next. Many of those movements happen automatically because they are habits formed over years. But the moment you begin to notice where your attention rests, you gain the ability to redirect it. That redirection does not require forcing yourself to ignore reality. It simply means choosing which aspects of reality deserve your energy. When you wake up in the morning, you can allow your attention to dwell on everything that feels incomplete and uncertain, or you can deliberately notice something that already carries value in your life. The warmth of sunlight through a window, the quiet rhythm of your breath, the fact that another day has begun with possibilities you cannot yet see. These small shifts may appear insignificant at first, but they gradually reshape the direction of your awareness. Over time, your mind becomes more familiar with appreciation than with frustration. and that familiarity begins influencing how life unfolds around you. Remember this carefully. The world you experience is deeply influenced by what consistently holds your attention. Your attention is not merely observing reality, it is quietly selecting which parts of reality will expand in your life. When you understand this, you begin to treat your attention with greater care, because the things you look at again and again are the very things that grow within the story of your life. There is something even deeper than thought that shapes the reality you experience. Most people believe that their thoughts are the primary force guiding their lives. But thoughts alone are rarely strong enough to create lasting change. The true language through which life responds to you is emotion. Emotion carries weight. Emotion carries intensity. Emotion tells the universe not just what you are thinking, but what you are truly living inside of. You may think 1,000 different thoughts during a single day, yet only a few of them carry emotional power. Those emotionally charged states are the signals that travel far beyond the surface of your mind. They move through your body, influence your behavior, and quietly shape the way other people respond to you. More importantly, they create a consistent frequency that begins organizing the experiences you encounter. This is why emotion is often described as the language of the universe. It communicates far more clearly than words or fleeting ideas ever could. Let me show you what this means through a story. In the center of a busy city, there was a young dancer named Teddy, who had spent years training to perfect his craft. He practiced every movement with discipline and determination. On the surface, it looked like he was doing everything necessary to succeed. Yet every time he stepped onto the stage, something strange would happen. His movements would tighten, his rhythm would falter. Small mistakes would appear that he never made during rehearsal. The more he worried about these mistakes, the more they seemed to multiply. After each performance, he would stand in front of the mirror wondering why his body refused to cooperate when it mattered most. The answer was hidden in the emotional state he carried into each performance. Teddy did not realize that beneath his dedication lived a deep fear of failure. As he prepared to perform, his thoughts filled with questions about what might go wrong. His heart beat faster, his breathing shortened, and tension moved through his muscles. That emotional signal traveled through every part of his body. The universe did not interpret his intention to succeed. It responded to the emotion he was broadcasting with the greatest intensity. Fear became the command that shaped the experience. His body simply mirrored the state he was living within. Now consider another musician who performed in the same city. Her name was Marjorie, and she played the cello with quiet grace. Like Teddy, she had spent years practicing her instrument. Yet she approached the stage in a completely different way. Before every performance, she would sit alone for a few minutes and allow her breathing to slow. She would close her eyes and feel a calm presence settle over her mind. Instead of worrying about mistakes, she imagined the sound of the music flowing smoothly through the hall. When she finally lifted her bow to the strings, her body was relaxed and her attention was clear. The music that followed carried a depth that audiences could feel immediately. From the outside, it appeared that Marjorie simply possessed more talent. But the real difference was not talent. It was emotional alignment. She had learned to enter a state of calm confidence before performing. That emotional state guided her movements, her timing, and the connection she created with the audience. The universe responded by arranging the conditions needed for that state to flourish. Listeners felt drawn to the atmosphere she created. Opportunities appeared naturally because the energy she carried invited them. You see, emotion works like an invisible current, moving through your entire life. When you remain in a particular emotional state long enough, it begins shaping the pattern of your experiences. If worry becomes your dominant emotion, then the world appears filled with situations that justify worry. If resentment becomes familiar, then interactions with others begin to reflect conflict and tension. But when emotions such as gratitude, peace, or confidence become stable within you, something remarkable begins to unfold. Life responds differently because the signal you are sending has changed. This does not mean you must pretend to feel something that is not genuine. Emotional alignment is not about forcing artificial positivity. It is about becoming aware of the emotional states that repeatedly guide your thoughts and reactions. When you notice those patterns, you gain the ability to gradually shift them. Instead of allowing fear to dominate every uncertain situation, you can pause and breathe until your body settles. Instead of letting frustration define your day, you can redirect your attention towards something that brings a sense of appreciation. These small adjustments might seem insignificant in a single moment, yet they accumulate over time and reshape the emotional climate you live within. Think of your emotional state as the atmosphere surrounding your life. Just as weather patterns influence everything beneath them, your emotional patterns influence the experiences that develop around you. A storm of anxiety creates tension wherever it moves. A calm atmosphere allows clarity and connection to emerge more easily. The universe reflects these emotional climates with remarkable precision because emotion is the clearest signal of what you are embodying in the present moment. Many people spend years trying to change their circumstances without ever examining the emotional environment they carry each day. They attempt to control external details while ignoring the internal signal that continues attracting the same patterns. But when you begin to understand the role of emotion, the process of transformation becomes clearer. Instead of fighting the world, you begin cultivating the emotional states that naturally invite better outcomes. Confidence encourages bold action. Gratitude opens awareness to opportunity. Peace allows creativity and insight to surface without resistance. The moment you realize that emotion speaks louder than thought, you start paying attention to the feelings that accompany your daily experiences. You notice how quickly a moment of anger can color an entire conversation. You notice how a brief sense of appreciation can soften an otherwise ordinary moment. Gradually, you begin choosing your emotional state with greater care because you understand that it is constantly shaping the way life responds to you. Remember this carefully. The universe does not listen only to the words you say or the thoughts that briefly pass through your mind. It responds to the emotional atmosphere you consistently embody. Emotion is the language through which your inner world communicates with the larger field of life. When you learn to cultivate emotions that reflect the reality you wish to experience, the events around you begin aligning in ways that may once have seemed impossible, and the more stable that emotional state becomes within you, the more clearly the world begins to mirror it. There is a deeper layer beneath your thoughts and emotions that quietly determines the experiences that unfold in your life. You could call it your frequency, not a sound that can be heard with the ears, but a pattern of energy that forms from the emotional states you live in most of the time. Every person carries this frequency. It develops from the beliefs you accept, the feelings you repeat, and the identity you assume to be true about yourself. Once that frequency becomes familiar to your mind, it begins attracting circumstances that match it with surprising accuracy. Think about how a tuning fork works. When one fork vibrates at a certain pitch, another fork tuned to the same pitch begins to vibrate as well, even when they are not touching. The energy moves invisibly through the air, and resonance occurs naturally. Life operates through a similar principle. The emotional state you maintain acts like that tuning fork. It sends out a signal that interacts with the world around you. Opportunities, people, and events begin aligning with that signal in ways that often seem mysterious if you are not aware of the pattern. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this idea clearly. In an old marketplace filled with merchants and travelers, there was a woman named Clara who sold small, handcrafted items from a modest stall. Every day she watched other merchants make successful trades while she struggled to sell even a few pieces of her work. As the months passed, she developed a quiet belief that fortune favored everyone except her. She repeated this thought so often that it eventually felt like a fact. Each morning when she opened her stall, she expected disappointment before the day had even begun. She would glance at the busy stalls around her and sigh quietly, convinced that luck simply did not belong to her. What Clara did not realize was that her belief had shaped the emotional frequency she carried into every interaction. Her posture reflected uncertainty. Her voice carried hesitation. Customers who approached her stall could sense that doubt even if they did not consciously recognize it. Many walked away quickly, not because her work lacked value, but because the energy surrounding the exchange felt uncertain. Each quiet rejection confirmed the belief she already held about herself. From her perspective, the world was proving her right. In reality, the world was simply mirroring the frequency she had been broadcasting for months. Now consider another merchant in the same marketplace. His name was George, and he too had struggled in the early years of his business. But George eventually discovered something important about the state he carried within himself. Instead of focusing on what he lacked, he began cultivating a feeling of quiet prosperity before opening his stall each morning. He would sit in stillness for a few minutes and imagine the satisfaction of successful trades already taking place. He allowed himself to feel as though abundance was not something distant, but something already forming around him. When he stood up and greeted customers, his energy felt steady and confident. Gradually, the atmosphere around George began to change. Conversations with customers became easier and more natural. People lingered longer at his stall because the interaction felt welcoming. Word spread through the marketplace that George was pleasant to trade with, and opportunities began appearing with surprising frequency. New partnerships formed and profitable exchanges followed. Other merchants wondered what secret he had discovered. To them, his success seemed like good fortune, but George understood that the real shift had occurred long before the results appeared. He had changed the frequency he lived in each day. The difference between Clara and George was not intelligence or skill. It was the emotional environment they carried within themselves. Clara lived in the frequency of doubt and scarcity. George practiced the frequency of confidence and expectation. Life responded accordingly because reality tends to mirror the dominant state a person inhabits. This principle does not operate occasionally. It operates continuously, whether you are aware of it or not. When you remain in a certain emotional pattern for long enough, it becomes familiar to your nervous system. Your mind begins interpreting situations through that pattern automatically. If the frequency you carry is shaped by worry, you will notice potential problems more quickly than opportunities. If the frequency is shaped by confidence, you will naturally move toward possibilities rather than hesitation. The outer world reflects these patterns because your actions, decisions, and interactions are guided by the emotional signal you carry into every moment. Understanding this principle does not mean ignoring challenges or pretending that difficulty does not exist. Life will always contain uncertainty and unexpected events, but the frequency you choose to maintain determines how those events unfold in your experience. Two people can face the same situation yet produce entirely different outcomes, depending on the emotional state they bring into it. One may approach the moment with tension and fear, while the other approaches with calm curiosity and trust. The situation itself may be identical, but the results often differ dramatically because the frequency guiding their actions is different. This is why learning to observe your inner state is so important. Most people spend years attempting to change external conditions while ignoring the internal signal that continues attracting the same patterns. They focus on strategies, plans, and effort, while their emotional frequency remains unchanged. When the frequency stays the same, the results often repeat themselves. But when the inner state shifts even slightly, the direction of experience begins to change as well. You can begin noticing this principle in the simplest moments of your day. Pay attention to how your body feels when you expect something to go wrong, compared to when you quietly believe that something positive might unfold. Notice the difference in how people respond to you when you carry tension compared to when you carry calm confidence. These small observations reveal how your frequency influences your interactions with the world. The more aware you become of this process, the more intentionally you can guide it. Remember this carefully. You do not simply live in the physical environment around you. You live in the emotional frequency you carry within you. That frequency shapes how you see the world, how you move through it, and how it responds in return. When you begin choosing that frequency with awareness, you gradually discover that reality is far more responsive than you once believed. Life begins aligning with the state you consistently embody, and the experiences you encounter start reflecting the energy you have chosen to live in. There is another force shaping your life that many people overlook because it appears so ordinary. It is the words you speak. Most people think of words as simple tools for communication, small sounds used to describe what has already happened. But words are far more powerful than that. Every sentence you repeat about your life quietly reinforces the reality you experience. Words are not only descriptions of the world, they are instructions given to your own mind and energy. Over time, those instructions begin shaping the direction your life moves. Think about how often you speak about yourself during a normal day. Sometimes you say things out loud to other people. Sometimes you whisper them silently in your mind. Statements about who you are, what you expect, and what you believe your future will look like. At first, these statements seem harmless, but when they are repeated again and again, they become part of the identity you carry. And once a statement becomes part of your identity, it begins influencing how you behave, how you react, and what possibilities you believe are available to you. Let me show you how this happens through a simple story. In a quiet valley there lived a weaver named Adira who created intricate fabrics with her hands. Her work had the potential to be beautiful. Yet each time she made a small mistake, she would sigh and say the same words, "My hands are clumsy. I never get anything right." At first these words felt like harmless frustration, but Adira repeated them so often that they became the background voice of her mind. When she sat down to weave, she already expected the thread to tangle. Her hands tightened with tension before the work even began. Small errors became more frequent, confirming the belief she had spoken so many times before. From her perspective, the mistakes proved that her words were accurate. In truth, the words had quietly shaped the experience she kept encountering. The same principle appeared in the life of a merchant named Khalil, who ran a small trading shop in a nearby town. For years, Khalil greeted each morning with the same phrase, "Another day of struggle." He said it casually while opening his shop doors, never realizing how deeply those words influenced his mood. Customers sensed his fatigue and rarely stayed long. His business moved slowly, and his frustration grew stronger. One day, an older trader passing through the town offered him a simple suggestion: "Pay attention to the words you speak each morning." Khalil was skeptical but curious. The next morning he paused before opening his doors and spoke a different sentence. "I welcome abundance today." At first the words felt strange, almost unnatural, but he continued repeating them with quiet intention. Over time his attitude shifted. His greeting to customers became warmer. Conversations lasted longer. New partnerships began forming. The change seemed small on the surface, but it slowly transformed the rhythm of his work and the results he experienced. What changed in Khalil's life was not magic. It was alignment. The words he spoke began shaping the emotional state he carried throughout the day. That emotional state influenced the way he interacted with people and the confidence with which he approached opportunities. The outer world responded to the energy behind those words. In this way, language became a creative force rather than a simple description of reality. You see, words are closely connected to the beliefs you hold about yourself. When you repeatedly declare something about your identity, your mind begins accepting that declaration as truth. If you constantly say that you are unlucky, incapable, or destined to struggle, those statements gradually become assumptions guiding your behavior. Your mind searches for evidence that confirms them. Your actions adapt to fit them. Opportunities that contradict them feel uncomfortable and are often ignored. Over time, the story you have spoken about yourself becomes the story you live inside. This is why conscious language matters so much. Every sentence you repeat about your life acts like a seed planted in the soil of your awareness. If the seed carries doubt or limitation, it will grow into patterns that reflect those qualities. If the seed carries confidence or possibility, it gradually produces different results. The process does not happen instantly, but repetition has extraordinary power. The mind learns through patterns. Words repeated with emotion become part of those patterns and eventually shape your expectations about the future. It is also important to understand that the universe does not analyze your words with complex logic. It responds primarily to the meaning and emotional energy behind them. When you complain repeatedly about what is missing in your life, your attention and emotion remain focused on absence. When you speak about progress, gratitude, or opportunity, your awareness moves toward growth. In this way, the language you use becomes the bridge between your inner state and the reality unfolding around you. Becoming aware of this principle changes the way you listen to yourself. You begin noticing the phrases that appear automatically when challenges arise. Instead of repeating words that reinforce limitation, you pause and choose language that supports the direction you wish to move. This does not mean pretending that difficulty does not exist. It simply means refusing to strengthen the story that keeps you trapped within it. Words can acknowledge a challenge without surrendering to it. They can describe a situation while still leaving room for possibility. Consider how differently your mind responds to these two statements. Nothing ever works for me. I am learning how to improve this situation. The first sentence closes the door on change because it frames failure as a permanent identity. The second sentence keeps the door open by allowing growth and discovery. Both sentences describe the same moment, yet the energy they create within your mind moves in completely different directions. Over time, those directions shape the path you follow. When you begin using words with intention, you are not simply changing your vocabulary. You are shaping the narrative your mind lives within every day. Language becomes a tool for guiding your emotional state and strengthening the beliefs that support your growth. The more consistently you speak from a place of possibility, the more naturally your actions align with that perspective. People respond differently. Opportunities appear in places that once seemed closed. The outer changes may seem gradual, but they are rooted in a quiet transformation that began with the sentences you chose to repeat. Remember this carefully. Words are never empty. They carry the power to reinforce the identity you believe you have and the future you expect to experience. When you speak about yourself, you are not merely commenting on your life. You are helping shape the direction it will take. Each statement becomes part of the architecture of your reality. And when you begin choosing those statements with awareness, you discover that language can become one of the most creative forces guiding the story of your life. There is a paradox about life that many people struggle to understand. The harder you try to force certain outcomes, the more they seem to slip away from you. And yet the moment you loosen your grip, the moment you allow space instead of pressure, things often begin to move again. This is what many ancient teachers quietly referred to as the paradox of letting go. It does not mean giving up on what you want. It means releasing the desperate tension that blocks the natural flow of creation. Most people believe that the only way to achieve something is through constant control. They try to manage every detail, anticipate every problem, and hold tightly to the results they desire. On the surface, this seems logical. Effort appears to create progress. Yet there is a subtle line between focused effort and anxious control. When that line is crossed, the mind enters a state of resistance. Instead of moving with life, you begin fighting against it. And that struggle creates friction that slows everything down. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. If you keep your hands relaxed, the water rests gently in your palms. But the moment you tighten your grip, the water slips through your fingers and disappears. Life behaves in a similar way. When you cling to an outcome with tension, you often create the very resistance that prevents it from arriving. But when you remain steady and open, the same outcome can move toward you with surprising ease. Let me share a story that illustrates this clearly. In a large city, there lived a woman named Evelyn who managed a small business. Evelyn believed that success required absolute control over every detail of her work. She checked every message multiple times. She revised every document until late at night. She monitored every decision made by her team because she feared that a small mistake could ruin everything she had built. At first, this intense focus seemed productive. Her business grew quickly, and clients respected her dedication. But over time, something began to change. The constant pressure she placed on herself created exhaustion. Her employees became hesitant to make decisions because they worried about disappointing her. Creativity slowly disappeared from the workplace, and opportunities that once felt exciting began to feel heavy and complicated. Evelyn believed that if she simply worked harder, everything would improve. But the more she tried to control the situation, the more tension filled the environment around her. Customers sensed the strain in conversations. Her team stopped sharing ideas because every suggestion was immediately analyzed and corrected. The very success she had tried so hard to protect began slipping away. Eventually, she reached a point where the exhaustion was impossible to ignore. One evening, she closed her office early and walked alone through the quiet streets of the city. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to stop thinking about the business entirely. She breathed slowly and let the noise of her thoughts settle. Something unexpected happened in that moment of stillness. As the tension in her mind softened, she realized how tightly she had been gripping every part of her work. She had believed that constant control was the only way to keep things from falling apart. But in truth, the pressure had been suffocating the very creativity that once helped her succeed. The next morning, she made a small but important change. Instead of correcting every decision, she began trusting her team to take responsibility for their roles. She listened to their ideas without immediately trying to reshape them. She allowed certain problems to unfold naturally, rather than rushing to control every outcome. At first, this shift felt uncomfortable. Letting go of control seemed risky after so many years of managing every detail. But gradually, something remarkable happened. Her employees became more confident and began sharing creative solutions she had never considered. Conversations with clients felt lighter and more genuine. Opportunities appeared that had been hidden beneath the tension of constant oversight. the business began growing again. Not because Evelyn forced it to grow, but because she created space for the natural flow of collaboration and innovation to return. In another town, far from the city, there lived a gardener named Harold, who experienced a similar lesson in a very different way. Harold loved growing fruit trees and spent years carefully tending a small orchard behind his home. Yet he constantly worried about the harvest. Every time a storm appeared on the horizon, he rushed outside to examine every branch. He measured the soil repeatedly and adjusted the watering schedule again and again, convinced that perfection was the only way to protect the trees. Despite all his effort, the orchard produced only modest results. One season, Harold became ill and was forced to rest for several weeks. During that time, he could not monitor the orchard as closely as before. The trees continued growing without his constant interference. When harvest time arrived, he walked slowly among the branches and discovered that the fruit was fuller and healthier than it had ever been. The soil had found its own balance. The rain had nourished the roots at the right time. By stepping back, he had allowed the natural rhythm of growth to unfold. Harold realized that his previous anxiety had been interfering with the quiet intelligence already present in nature. These stories reveal an important truth about the paradox of letting go. Effort and intention are necessary parts of creation, but they must be balanced with trust. When your mind becomes consumed with controlling every outcome, you create tension that blocks the very flow you hope to experience. But when you remain clear about what you desire while releasing the need to force it, life begins organizing itself in ways you could not have planned. Letting go does not mean abandoning your goals. It means releasing the fear that your goals cannot happen unless you struggle constantly. It means allowing space for possibilities that your mind alone could never design. When you hold a vision with calm confidence instead of anxious pressure, your actions become more natural. You respond to opportunities with clarity rather than desperation. The world around you begins to feel less like a battlefield and more like a current you are learning to move with. Remember this carefully. Creation flows best through a mind that is both focused and relaxed. When you cling too tightly, you create resistance. When you release with trust, you allow life to move freely. The paradox of letting go is not weakness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that the universe often works most powerfully when you stop trying to force it and begin allowing it to unfold. There is a part of your mind that works quietly beneath the surface of your daily awareness. It rarely speaks in clear words, yet it influences almost everything you do. This hidden layer of consciousness is often called the subconscious mind. You could think of it as a garden where the beliefs you repeat throughout your life slowly take root and grow. Some of these beliefs nourish your growth and open new possibilities, while others quietly limit the direction your life can move. The important thing to understand is that whatever grows in this inner garden eventually shapes the landscape of your outer world. From the moment you were a child, your mind began collecting impressions about how life works. Words spoken by parents, teachers, and friends gradually formed ideas about what is possible and what is not. Small experiences created emotional memories that your mind interpreted as proof of those ideas. Over time, these impressions became beliefs. Most of them formed so early and so quietly that you rarely question them. They simply become the background assumptions through which you see the world. Once a belief settles into the subconscious, it begins guiding your decisions and reactions automatically. Imagine walking through a garden where seeds have been planted for many years. Some of the plants grow strong and healthy because they were given sunlight and care. Others spread quietly like weeds because no one noticed them early enough to remove them. The subconscious mind works in a similar way. Thoughts that carry strong emotion become seeds planted deep within your awareness. When those thoughts are repeated often enough, they grow into beliefs that feel natural and unquestionable. Later in life, those beliefs influence how you interpret opportunities, challenges, and relationships. Let me tell you about a woman named Millie who lived in a quiet town near the edge of a forest. Millie possessed remarkable artistic talent. From a young age, she could draw landscapes that captured light and movement with incredible detail. Her teachers admired her work and friends encouraged her to pursue a career as a painter. Yet Millie never truly believed she deserved success. Years earlier, she had overheard a careless remark from a relative who once said that artists rarely make a living from their work. That single comment settled into her mind and slowly grew into a belief she rarely questioned. Even as her skills improved, she carried a quiet assumption that her talent would never lead anywhere meaningful. Because of this belief, Millie avoided opportunities that could have changed her life. When a gallery owner once invited her to submit her paintings, she hesitated for weeks before declining. She convinced herself that other artists were more deserving. When friends suggested that she sell prints of her work, she dismissed the idea quickly. In her mind, success belonged to people who were somehow more qualified. Without realizing it, Millie had allowed a single seed of doubt to grow into a belief that quietly directed the path of her life. Her garden was filled with talent, yet the weeds of uncertainty kept her from seeing the beauty she had already cultivated. In the same region lived a carpenter named Lester who experienced the opposite pattern. Lester did not begin his life with extraordinary advantages. His workshop was small and his tools were simple. But from an early age he carried a belief that effort and learning could gradually create opportunity. Whenever he faced difficulty, he reminded himself that skills could grow through patience and practice. This belief did not guarantee immediate success, but it shaped how he approached every challenge. When a project failed, he studied the mistake and tried again. When new opportunities appeared, he accepted them with curiosity rather than hesitation. Over time, Lester's belief became the foundation of his progress. Each small success strengthened his confidence and encouraged him to take on larger projects. Clients trusted his steady attitude and recommended him to others. His workshop expanded, and new apprentices came to learn from him. People who observed his journey often described him as fortunate. Yet the true source of his progress was the belief he had nurtured within his subconscious. That belief acted like fertile soil where effort and opportunity could take root and flourish. These two lives reveal how powerful subconscious beliefs can be. Millie and Lester both possessed ability and potential, yet the inner assumptions they carried created very different outcomes. Millie's belief quietly restricted the possibilities she allowed herself to explore. Lester's belief encouraged growth and resilience even when progress was slow. The difference did not begin in their external circumstances. It began in the seeds planted within their subconscious gardens. Most people rarely pause to examine the beliefs shaping their behavior. They assume their reactions are simply part of their personality. But personality is often the visible expression of deeper beliefs formed long ago. When you feel hesitation in the face of opportunity, it may not come from lack of ability. It may come from a belief planted years earlier that whispers you are not ready. When you expect conflict in relationships, it may reflect old emotional memories that taught your mind to prepare for disappointment. These beliefs operate quietly because the subconscious prefers familiar patterns, even when those patterns no longer serve you. The empowering truth is that a garden can always be cultivated again. Beliefs are powerful, but they are not permanent. When you begin observing the thoughts that repeat in your mind, you start identifying the seeds that have been planted there. Some of them will support your growth and deserve continued attention. Others may reveal themselves as limitations that no longer belong in your life. By choosing new thoughts and reinforcing them through consistent experience, you gradually plant new seeds in the soil of your subconscious. Over time, these new beliefs grow stronger and begin influencing your actions in more constructive ways. This process does not happen overnight because beliefs grow through repetition and emotional experience. Yet every moment of awareness gives you the chance to nurture the kind of inner garden you wish to live within. When you choose thoughts that encourage growth, possibility, and confidence, you are slowly preparing the soil for new outcomes to appear. The world you experience tomorrow will often reflect the beliefs you are planting today. Remember this carefully. Your subconscious mind is always cultivating the seeds of the ideas you repeat most often. Whether those ideas strengthen you or limit you depends on what you choose to nurture. When you become conscious of the beliefs growing within you, you regain the ability to shape your inner garden with intention. And as those beliefs take root and flourish, the landscape of your life gradually begins to mirror the garden you have chosen to grow inside your mind. There is a faculty within you that is far more powerful than most people realize. It is not physical strength, and it is not intelligence in the ordinary sense. It is imagination. Many people treat imagination as something childish, something meant only for stories or entertainment. Yet the truth is that imagination is one of the most powerful creative forces available to the human mind. Long before anything becomes real in the outer world, it is first formed within the invisible world of imagination. Every building that stands in a city, every invention that changed the way people live, and every achievement that once seemed impossible began as an image in someone's mind. Before it existed in physical form, it existed as a possibility seen clearly within imagination. In this sense, imagination is not an escape from reality. It is the blueprint from which reality often grows. The images you repeatedly hold in your mind quietly guide your actions, your decisions, and your expectations about the future. Over time, those inner images begin shaping the direction your life moves. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this principle. In a rural valley surrounded by fields and hills, there lived a farmer named Fanny, who struggled year after year to grow a successful harvest. Each season began with hope, but as the months passed, she became increasingly anxious about the outcome. When she looked across her land, she often imagined the worst possibilities. She pictured storms damaging the crops, or pests destroying the fields before harvest arrived. Even on calm mornings, her mind wandered toward images of loss and disappointment. Without realizing it, she had trained her imagination to rehearse failure again and again. Because these images felt vivid and convincing, they influenced how she approached her work. She hesitated to invest time in improving the soil because she assumed the effort would be wasted. She delayed repairing irrigation channels because she believed the crops would probably fail anyway. Her actions followed the pictures she had already accepted in her mind. When the harvest finally came and the yield was poor, it seemed as though her fears had predicted the future. In truth, those fears had quietly guided the choices that produced the result. Not far from her land lived another farmer named Albert, whose approach was very different. Albert understood that imagination was more than idle thinking. Before planting his crops each season, he spent time walking through his fields in silence. As he moved between the rows of soil, he imagined what the land would look like when the crops were tall and healthy. He pictured the color of the leaves under sunlight and the sound of wind moving through the field at harvest time. These images were not fantasies meant to escape reality. They were clear internal visions that shaped how he worked each day. Because Albert could see the future of his fields so clearly in his mind, he acted with confidence and patience. When problems appeared, he searched for solutions instead of assuming failure. When unexpected rain arrived, he adapted his methods rather than giving up. His imagination gave direction to his effort. Over time, his harvests grew stronger and more reliable. Other farmers wondered how he maintained such steady results despite the uncertainties of weather and soil. The answer was not hidden in luck, but in the images he cultivated within his imagination long before the crops appeared in the ground. These two farmers demonstrate something important about the role imagination plays in shaping your life. Your mind naturally forms pictures about the future, whether you intend it to or not. Sometimes those images appear as hopes and dreams. Other times they appear as fears and doubts. The problem is not that imagination exists. The problem is that most people allow it to wander unconsciously. When imagination is guided by worry, it rehearses negative outcomes again and again. When imagination is guided by intention, it becomes a creative tool that prepares the mind for success. Your brain does not always distinguish between an event that is vividly imagined and one that is physically experienced. When you imagine something with emotional intensity, your body responds as if the event were real. Muscles tense, breathing changes, and your attention becomes focused on the details of the image. This response is why athletes often use visualization before competitions. By repeatedly imagining successful performance, they prepare their minds and bodies to move in that direction when the real moment arrives. The same principle applies to any area of life. The images you repeat in your mind gradually influence the actions you take in the world. Many people unintentionally use imagination against themselves. They replay past mistakes in their minds or imagine future problems that have not yet appeared. These mental pictures create anxiety and hesitation that shape how they behave. Over time, the results they experience begin to resemble the fears they have practiced imagining. This does not happen because imagination possesses magical power on its own. It happens because imagination directs attention and emotion towards certain possibilities, and those possibilities gradually become the paths people follow. When you learn to guide your imagination intentionally, you begin working with one of the most powerful tools available to you. Instead of allowing your mind to repeat images of failure, you can begin cultivating images of progress. Instead of imagining rejection, you can imagine meaningful connection. Instead of picturing obstacles as permanent, you can picture yourself moving beyond them with clarity and determination. These images slowly reshape the expectations you carry into each moment. Over time, your behavior begins aligning with the visions you have rehearsed within your mind. You become more willing to take action because the outcome no longer feels unfamiliar. Your confidence grows because you have already experienced success many times within imagination. Opportunities that once felt intimidating begin to feel possible because your mind has practiced navigating them. Gradually, the outer world begins reflecting the images that have taken root within you. Remember this carefully. Imagination is not a distraction from reality. It is one of the first stages of creation. The images you hold repeatedly within your mind become the quiet blueprint guiding your choices and shaping your experiences. When you understand this, you begin treating imagination with greater respect. Instead of letting it wander through fear and doubt, you guide it toward the future you wish to live. And as those images grow clearer and stronger, the world around you slowly begins to reflect the vision you have already created within. There is a state of mind that quietly transforms the way life responds to you. It is not complicated, and it does not require special knowledge. Yet when people truly live in this state, their experiences begin to shift in ways that often seem surprising. That state is gratitude. Gratitude is more than polite appreciation for what you already have. It is a powerful emotional frequency that changes the way you see the world and the way the world responds to you. When gratitude becomes a stable part of your inner life, it creates an atmosphere where growth and opportunity naturally begin to appear. Most people believe gratitude is something you feel after good things happen. When success arrives, they feel thankful. When life becomes comfortable, they pause to appreciate it. But the deeper secret is that gratitude works most powerfully when it comes before the visible results. When you learn to feel appreciation, even in ordinary moments, you send a signal that life is already meaningful and valuable. That signal changes the emotional climate you live within. And once your emotional climate shifts, the experiences around you begin aligning with that new state. Let me share a story that illustrates this clearly. In a small coastal village, there lived a fisherman named Sadi, who had spent many years working on the water. The ocean had provided for his family through countless seasons. Yet Sadi rarely noticed the quiet generosity of his life. Each morning he woke with a sense of complaint. The wind was never quite right. The nets were never strong enough, and the market prices were never fair. His mind had become so focused on what was missing that he overlooked everything that was already working in his favor. When the fishing days were slow, he blamed the sea. When the catch was good, he quickly moved on to worrying about the next day. His life slowly felt heavier, even though his circumstances had not changed dramatically. One afternoon, Sadi met an older sailor who had traveled across many oceans. The sailor listened patiently to Sadi's complaints before asking a simple question. When was the last time you thanked the sea for feeding your family? The question caught Sadi by surprise. He had never considered that idea before. The next morning, as he pushed his boat away from the shore, he hesitated for a moment and quietly whispered a word of thanks. At first, the gesture felt unusual, almost unnecessary. Yet something subtle changed in the way he approached the day. Instead of searching for reasons to complain, he began noticing small details that had once gone unnoticed. The color of the water at sunrise, the steady rhythm of the waves, the quiet strength of the wind guiding his boat. Day after day, he continued this simple practice of appreciation. The ocean did not instantly become more generous, but Sadi's relationship with his work began to change. He approached each day with a calmer mind. He became more patient when the nets came up empty and more attentive to the patterns of the sea. Gradually, his fishing improved because he was no longer distracted by frustration. Opportunities appeared that he might have missed before. Fellow fishermen began sharing knowledge with him because his attitude had become lighter and more cooperative. Over time, Sadi realized that the act of gratitude had changed something far more important than the size of his catch. It had changed the way he experienced his life. In another place not far from the village lived a carpenter named Wallace, who understood the same principle in a different way. Wallace ran a modest workshop where he crafted wooden furniture. His business was never extravagant. Yet he carried a steady habit of appreciating the materials he worked with each day. When he entered the workshop in the morning, he would pause for a moment and feel grateful for the wood, the tools, and the quiet space where he could create. This simple state of appreciation shaped the atmosphere of his work. Customers who visited his shop felt comfortable and respected. Conversations were warm and genuine. Over the years, his reputation grew not only because of the quality of his furniture, but because people enjoyed the feeling they experienced in his presence. Gratitude had quietly become part of the energy surrounding everything he did. These stories reveal something essential about the nature of gratitude. It changes your attention. When you focus on what is already valuable, your mind becomes more open to possibilities. Instead of scanning the world for problems, you begin recognizing resources and opportunities. Your emotional state becomes calmer and more receptive, which allows creativity and insight to appear naturally. People respond differently to someone who carries genuine appreciation because that energy feels safe and welcoming. Opportunities often grow from these subtle shifts in perception and behavior. Gratitude also changes the way you interpret challenges. Difficult moments do not disappear from life, but gratitude softens the emotional weight you place upon them. Instead of viewing obstacles as proof that life is unfair, you begin seeing them as temporary conditions that can still contain lessons or unexpected openings. This perspective allows your mind to remain flexible, even when circumstances are uncertain. And flexibility is one of the greatest advantages a person can possess when navigating change. When gratitude becomes a habit rather than an occasional reaction, it begins shaping the frequency you live in every day. You wake up noticing what already supports your life rather than focusing only on what is missing. That shift may appear small at first, yet over time it transforms the way you move through the world. Conversations become warmer, decisions become clearer, and opportunities appear more visible because your attention is no longer clouded by constant dissatisfaction. Remember this carefully. Gratitude is not about pretending that everything in life is perfect. It is about recognizing the value that already exists within your present moment. When you allow appreciation to become part of your daily awareness, you create an emotional atmosphere that welcomes growth. The universe responds naturally to that atmosphere because gratitude signals openness rather than resistance. As that openness deepens within you, the experiences that follow often carry the same tone of abundance and connection, and gradually you begin to realize that gratitude is not simply a reaction to a good life. It is one of the quiet forces that helps create one. There is a moment in every transformation where you must believe before you can see. Most people have been taught to trust only what their eyes can confirm. They wait for proof before allowing themselves to feel confident. They wait for success before believing they are capable. They wait for evidence before accepting the possibility of change. But the deeper truth of creation works in the opposite direction. The inner state of belief often comes first, and the visible evidence follows later. This idea can feel uncomfortable at first because it challenges the way most people have learned to think. The mind prefers certainty. It wants proof that something will work before it invests energy into it. Yet nearly every meaningful achievement in human history began with belief before evidence existed. Inventors believed in ideas that no one else could see. Explorers trusted that new lands existed beyond the horizon long before maps confirmed them. Artists believed in their vision before anyone else understood its value. In each case, the belief created the persistence and courage needed to bring the vision into reality. Let me tell you a story that illustrates this principle clearly. In a quiet town surrounded by hills, there lived a woman named Opal, who dreamed of opening a small bakery. She loved the art of baking and had spent years perfecting her recipes in the kitchen of her modest home. Friends who tasted her bread and pastries often encouraged her to turn that passion into a business. Yet Opal hesitated every time the idea appeared. She told herself that she would believe in the dream once she saw proof that it could succeed. She waited for perfect conditions, a larger kitchen, more savings, and some kind of sign that customers would actually come. Because that proof never arrived, she continued baking only for friends and family, quietly wondering what might have happened if she had been brave enough to try. Across the same town lived a man named Raymond who carried a similar dream but approached it differently. Raymond wanted to open a small bookshop where people could gather and share ideas. At the time, he had very little money and no guarantee that such a shop would survive in a town where most people were busy with work and rarely visited bookstores. Yet Raymond allowed himself to believe in the possibility before he saw any evidence that it would succeed. He imagined the warm light of the shop in the evening and the quiet conversations between readers exploring new ideas together. That belief did not erase the challenges ahead of him, but it gave him the energy to take the first step. Raymond began with what he had. He rented a small room at the corner of a busy street and filled it with shelves he built himself. The first weeks were quiet, and only a few people walked through the door. Yet Raymond continued greeting each visitor as though the shop were already thriving. He spoke about books with genuine enthusiasm and listened carefully to what people enjoyed reading. Slowly, the atmosphere of the place began to change. Word spread through the town that there was a welcoming space where readers could gather. More visitors arrived, and small events began taking place in the evenings. Within a few years, the shop became a beloved part of the community. What others saw as luck or timing was in fact the result of Raymond's willingness to believe before the evidence appeared. The difference between Opal and Raymond did not lie in talent or opportunity. Both had dreams that could have grown into something meaningful. The difference was the order in which belief and evidence appeared in their lives. Opal waited for proof before allowing herself to believe. Raymond allowed belief to guide his actions even when proof had not yet arrived. That belief gave direction to his effort and patience during uncertain moments. Over time, his actions produced the evidence he had trusted would eventually appear. This pattern can be observed in many areas of life. When a person believes they are capable of learning a new skill, they approach challenges with curiosity rather than fear. Mistakes become part of the process rather than signs of failure. That attitude leads to consistent practice, and practice eventually produces visible improvement. The belief did not magically create the skill, but it created the mindset necessary for growth to occur. Without that belief, the person might have stopped trying long before progress became visible. Faith before evidence does not mean ignoring reality or pretending difficulties do not exist. It means choosing a perspective that allows possibility to grow instead of shutting it down prematurely. When you believe something is possible, you remain open to solutions and opportunities that might otherwise be dismissed. Your mind becomes attentive to paths forward rather than obstacles alone. In this way, belief becomes a guiding force that shapes the direction of your effort. Many people misunderstand faith as blind optimism, but true faith is quieter and more grounded than that. It is a calm inner certainty that something meaningful can unfold even when the details are not yet clear. This certainty allows you to act with patience and resilience. When challenges appear, you do not immediately interpret them as proof that your vision is impossible. Instead, you see them as part of the path that must be navigated before the outcome becomes visible. Over time, this steady belief begins influencing the way others respond to you as well. Confidence encourages cooperation and support because people feel the sincerity behind it. Opportunities that once seemed distant begin to appear because your actions have moved you closer to environments where they exist. The evidence you once waited for gradually forms around the belief you were willing to hold in advance. Remember this carefully. The visible world often lags behind the inner state of belief. What you see today may reflect thoughts and expectations you carried months or even years earlier. When you understand this principle, you become more patient with the process of change. Instead of demanding immediate proof, you focus on cultivating the inner conviction that guides your actions forward. Faith before evidence is not about forcing the future to obey your wishes. It is about aligning your thoughts, emotions, and actions with the possibility you wish to experience. When that alignment becomes consistent, your life begins moving in a direction that reflects the belief you have chosen to hold. And one day you may look around and realize that the evidence you once searched for has quietly appeared in the very world you helped create through faith that came long before it was visible. There is a quiet voice that speaks within you long before logic begins explaining anything. It does not shout and it rarely argues. Most of the time it appears as a subtle feeling, a small sense of knowing that something is right or wrong even when you cannot immediately explain why. This inner guidance is often called intuition. Many people ignore it because it does not arrive in the form of clear instructions. Yet those who learn to listen carefully discover that intuition can guide them through life with remarkable precision. Intuition does not operate through the loud reasoning of the analytical mind. Instead, it works through awareness that arises beneath the surface of conscious thought. Your brain collects countless impressions every day. You notice small details in people's expressions, subtle changes in environments, and patterns that repeat over time. Much of this information never reaches your conscious attention, yet your mind continues processing it quietly. Intuition is the moment when that hidden understanding rises to the surface as a feeling or insight. It is the intelligence of your deeper awareness speaking in a language that is felt rather than explained. Let me tell you a story about a woman named Hazel who learned the importance of this quiet voice through experience. Hazel worked in a busy office where decisions often needed to be made quickly. One afternoon, her company offered her an opportunity to join a new project that promised rapid advancement. On the surface, the offer looked exciting. The salary was higher, and the position appeared prestigious. Yet when Hazel read the proposal, she felt an uneasy sensation that she could not easily describe. Something about the arrangement felt rushed and uncertain. Her mind tried to dismiss the feeling by listing the advantages of the promotion. Logic told her that accepting the opportunity was the sensible choice. For several days, Hazel ignored the subtle warning within her and focused only on the practical benefits of the offer. Eventually, she agreed to join the project. At first, everything seemed promising, but within a few months, the situation began to unravel. The leadership behind the project lacked clear direction, and internal disagreements slowed every step forward. Hazel found herself trapped in endless meetings where progress felt impossible. Looking back, she remembered the uneasy feeling she had experienced when the opportunity first appeared. That quiet signal had been her intuition, recognizing patterns she had not consciously analyzed. Not far from Hazel's office, there lived a craftsman named Marvin, who had learned to trust this inner guidance through years of experience. Marvin built musical instruments by hand and often worked alone in a small workshop. One evening, he received an unexpected invitation from a traveling musician who wanted him to produce several instruments for a tour. The offer seemed appealing but also carried risks because it required Marvin to pause his regular orders for several months. Instead of making an immediate decision, Marvin sat quietly in his workshop and listened to his inner response. As he imagined the project, he felt a calm sense of excitement rather than pressure or doubt. The feeling was not dramatic, but it was clear and steady. Marvin trusted that signal and accepted the offer. Over the following months, the collaboration turned into one of the most meaningful experiences of his career. The instruments he built during that time gained attention from other musicians, and new opportunities followed. When people later asked Marvin how he decided to take the risk, he often smiled and said that the answer arrived long before he could explain it with words. He simply learned to listen carefully when the quiet voice of intuition appeared. These stories reveal something important about the nature of intuitive guidance. Intuition rarely competes with the loud reasoning of the mind. It appears gently, often as a sense of alignment or discomfort that signals whether something resonates with your deeper awareness. The challenge is that modern life encourages constant noise and distraction. When the mind is filled with endless information and pressure, there is little space for subtle signals to be noticed. Many people rush from decision to decision without pausing long enough to sense what their intuition is telling them. Learning to hear this inner guidance requires moments of stillness. When you slow your breathing and allow your mind to settle, you begin noticing feelings that were previously buried beneath the surface of constant thinking. These feelings are not random impulses. They often reflect the accumulated wisdom of your experiences and perceptions working together in ways your conscious mind cannot immediately describe. When you treat those signals with curiosity rather than dismissal, you begin strengthening your connection to them. Intuition also becomes clearer when you learn to distinguish it from fear. Fear tends to create tension and urgency. It pushes you to react quickly or withdraw completely. Intuition usually feels different. Even when it warns you about something, it carries a sense of calm clarity rather than panic. It is more like a gentle nudge guiding your attention towards something important. The more you observe these differences, the easier it becomes to recognize which voice is speaking. Over time, trusting your intuition builds confidence in your ability to navigate uncertainty. You realize that not every decision requires complete information before action is possible. Sometimes the quiet awareness within you has already recognized patterns your conscious mind has not yet assembled into words. By listening to that awareness, you allow a deeper intelligence to participate in your choices. This does not replace careful thinking or planning, but it complements them with insight that logic alone cannot provide. Remember this carefully. Intuition is not a mysterious gift reserved for a few people. It is a natural ability that becomes stronger when you create space to hear it. Each time you pause to listen rather than rushing forward, you strengthen the connection between your conscious decisions and the deeper understanding within you. As that connection grows, you begin moving through life with greater clarity, because your actions are guided not only by analysis, but also by the quiet wisdom that has always been present inside you. There is an invisible weight many people carry through life without realizing how deeply it influences them. It is not something you can see, yet it shapes the way you think, the way you react, and the way your body feels from day to day. This weight is emotional energy that was never fully processed or released. Experiences from the past often leave impressions within the mind and body. When those impressions remain unresolved, they quietly influence how you respond to new situations. Healing this inner energy is one of the most important steps toward living with clarity and freedom. Every human being experiences moments of pain, disappointment, or loss. These experiences are part of life, and they help shape who you become. The difficulty appears when the emotions connected to those moments remain trapped inside your awareness. When a painful event occurs, your mind may try to protect you by pushing the feeling aside and continuing forward. At first, this response seems useful because it allows you to function despite difficulty. But emotions do not disappear simply because they are ignored. They settle deeper into the subconscious and become patterns that influence your reactions in the future. Imagine a lake whose surface appears calm while beneath the water currents continue moving quietly. The unresolved emotions within you behave in a similar way. On the surface, you may appear calm and composed. Yet beneath that surface, certain memories still carry tension. When a situation arises that resembles those past experiences, the old emotional energy can suddenly return. You may react with fear, anger, or sadness even when the present moment does not fully justify such intensity. In these moments, your reaction is not only about the current situation, it is also connected to the energy that has remained unresolved within you. Let me share a story that illustrates this clearly. In a small town surrounded by forests, there lived a woman named Ruth, who had once experienced a painful betrayal from someone she trusted deeply. The event happened many years earlier, yet the memory remained vivid in her mind. Ruth told herself that she had moved on from the experience, but she rarely allowed herself to speak about it or examine the emotions connected to it. Whenever the memory appeared, she quickly pushed it aside and focused on something else. As time passed, Ruth noticed that forming new relationships felt increasingly difficult. When someone showed kindness, she felt suspicious rather than comforted. When a conversation became emotionally open, she instinctively withdrew. Friends often described her as distant, even though she wished for deeper connection. What Ruth did not realize was that the emotional energy from her past betrayal had never been released. It remained within her awareness like an echo that influenced every new interaction. Her mind believed it was protecting her, but in reality it was preventing the healing she truly needed. Not far from Ruth's town, there lived a teacher named Clyde, who had faced his own share of difficult experiences. Years earlier, he had lost a close friend in a tragic accident. The grief from that loss had been overwhelming, yet Clyde chose to approach the pain differently. Instead of hiding from the emotion, he allowed himself time to feel it fully. He spoke openly with people he trusted and spent quiet hours reflecting on the memories he carried. Slowly, the intense sadness began transforming into a sense of understanding and compassion. The memory of his friend remained important to him, but the emotional energy around it softened rather than remaining trapped. Because Clyde allowed the healing process to unfold, he became more open to life rather than more guarded. When others shared their struggles, he listened with genuine empathy. His presence carried a sense of calm because he had faced his own pain without running from it. People often felt safe speaking with him because they sensed that he understood emotional difficulty without judgment. In this way, the healing of Clyde's inner energy allowed him to live with greater connection and clarity. These two lives show how unresolved emotional energy can shape the direction of your experiences. Ruth's attempt to avoid her pain caused the energy to remain active within her. Clyde's willingness to acknowledge his grief allowed the energy to move and transform. The difference was not the absence of pain, but the way each person responded to it. Healing begins when you allow yourself to recognize the emotions that have been waiting for attention. This process does not require dramatic action. Often it begins with simple awareness. When a strong reaction appears in your life, you can pause and ask, what feeling is truly present beneath the surface? Instead of immediately judging the emotion, you allow yourself to observe it with patience. Anger may reveal hidden sadness. Fear may reveal a memory that has not yet been understood. By acknowledging these feelings, you create space for them to release their grip on your mind and body. Forgiveness also plays a powerful role in healing emotional energy. Forgiveness does not mean approving harmful actions or pretending that pain never occurred. It means freeing yourself from the constant weight of resentment. When you forgive, you release the emotional bond that keeps you tied to the past. The memory may remain, but the energy surrounding it no longer controls your reactions. In this way, forgiveness becomes an act of self-liberation rather than a favor given to someone else. As emotional healing continues, your mind and body gradually return to a state of balance. Situations that once triggered intense reactions begin to feel manageable. Relationships become easier because you are no longer carrying hidden defenses into every interaction. Creativity and intuition also become clearer because your energy is no longer trapped in unresolved tension. The more space you create within yourself, the more freely life can move through you. Remember this carefully. Healing your inner emotional energy is not about erasing the past. It is about transforming the way that past lives within you. When you allow unresolved feelings to surface with awareness and compassion, they gradually lose their power to control your present moment. What once felt like a burden can become a source of wisdom and empathy. And as that transformation unfolds, you discover that true strength does not come from avoiding emotional pain. It comes from facing it with honesty until the energy that once held you back becomes part of the deeper understanding, guiding your life forward. There is a force within every human being that quietly pushes life forward. It is not something that can be measured with numbers or fully explained through logic. Yet it has guided every discovery, every invention, and every transformation throughout history. That force is desire. Desire is often misunderstood because people sometimes associate it with greed or endless wanting. But at its deeper level, desire is not about excess. It is about expansion. It is the inner signal that something within you is ready to grow beyond the limits of your current experience. From the moment you were born, desire has been shaping your movement through life. A child desires to walk before they understand how their body works. A student desires knowledge before they fully grasp what they are capable of learning. An artist desires to create before anyone else sees the value of their work. Desire appears long before the outcome exists, and it quietly motivates the actions that eventually bring the outcome into form. In this way, desire acts like a compass pointing toward the direction your life is capable of expanding. Yet many people learn to distrust their desires as they grow older. They are told that wanting more is unrealistic or selfish. They begin comparing their dreams with the expectations of others and gradually silence the inner voice that once inspired them. Over time, they settle into routines that feel safe but uninspiring. The desire that once moved them forward becomes hidden beneath layers of doubt and caution. Life may appear stable from the outside, yet something inside them quietly wonders what might have been possible if they had followed the deeper call within. Let me tell you about a woman named Esther who experienced this conflict in her own life. Esther worked in a comfortable office job where the schedule was predictable and the income was steady. From the outside, her life appeared secure. Yet for many years, she carried a quiet desire to create clothing designs inspired by the traditional patterns she remembered from her childhood. Whenever she imagined turning that passion into a small business, she felt a mixture of excitement and hesitation. A voice in her mind whispered that such dreams belonged to people with more resources and more confidence. Each time the desire appeared, she pushed it aside and returned to the safety of her routine. Years passed in this way until one evening Esther visited a local festival where artisans displayed handmade work. As she walked among the stalls, she noticed how alive the creators seemed while sharing their craft. Something inside her shifted in that moment. The old desire that had been quietly waiting beneath the surface returned with surprising clarity. Instead of dismissing it, she allowed herself to sit with the feeling and acknowledge its importance. She realized that the longing she had carried for years was not a distraction from life. It was an invitation to expand into a new version of herself. Esther did not abandon her responsibilities overnight. Instead, she began taking small steps toward her dream. After work, she experimented with fabric and design in her home. She studied patterns and learned how to bring her ideas into form. The process required patience and persistence. Yet each step felt meaningful because it was guided by the desire she had finally chosen to honor. Over time, her designs gained attention, and she eventually opened a small studio where people could experience the beauty of her work. The desire she once feared had become the path through which her creativity and confidence flourished. In another town, there lived a man named Percy whose story revealed the same principle from a different perspective. Percy grew up believing that ambition was dangerous. He had been taught that wanting more from life often led to disappointment. For many years he avoided pursuing anything that stirred strong excitement within him. Yet deep inside he felt drawn toward building machines and solving mechanical problems. Whenever he encountered a complex device, he felt an intense curiosity about how it worked. That curiosity was a form of desire, quietly guiding his attention towards something meaningful. Eventually, Percy decided to follow that curiosity rather than ignore it. He began repairing small machines for neighbors and gradually expanded his knowledge through experimentation. The more he engaged with this desire, the more confident he became in his ability to solve problems others avoided. Years later, his workshop became known as a place where complicated mechanical challenges could be understood and repaired. What once appeared to be a simple curiosity had been the beginning of a deeper calling waiting to be expressed. These stories reveal an important truth about the role of desire in your life. Desire is not merely a passing wish. It is often the first signal that your potential is seeking expression. When a desire appears repeatedly, it may be pointing toward a direction where your abilities and passions can grow together. Ignoring that signal does not eliminate it. It simply causes the energy behind it to remain dormant rather than active. Of course, not every desire must be followed immediately or without reflection. Some desires appear briefly and fade as circumstances change. The key is learning to recognize the desires that return again and again with quiet persistence. Those desires often carry deeper meaning because they arise from the parts of you that are ready to evolve. When you listen carefully to them, you begin discovering paths that feel both challenging and deeply fulfilling. Following a meaningful desire does not guarantee that every step will be easy. Growth rarely unfolds without obstacles. Yet when your actions align with something you genuinely care about, the effort itself becomes rewarding. You develop resilience because the direction feels meaningful rather than forced. Challenges become lessons rather than barriers. Over time, the energy of desire continues, fueling your progress even when the results are not immediate. Remember this carefully. Desire is not the enemy of peace or balance. It is often the engine that drives expansion and creativity within your life. When you treat your deeper desires with respect and curiosity, they begin guiding you toward experiences that reveal your potential. Life does not ask you to suppress the energy that inspires you. It invites you to understand it and direct it with wisdom. And when you learn to honor the desires that truly resonate within you, you begin discovering paths that lead not only to achievement, but also to a deeper sense of purpose and fulfillment. There is a power that many people overlook because it appears so quiet that it almost feels invisible. In a world that constantly rewards noise, speed, and constant reaction, silence can seem unimportant. Yet those who learn to enter true stillness discover something extraordinary. Within silence, the mind becomes clear, the body relaxes, and the deeper intelligence within you begins to speak. Silence is not emptiness. It is a space where awareness becomes strong enough to hear what is normally drowned out by distraction. Most people move through life surrounded by constant stimulation. There are conversations, notifications, responsibilities, and endless streams of information pulling attention in every direction. The mind becomes so accustomed to noise that even a few moments of quiet can feel uncomfortable. When silence appears, people often rush to fill it with words or activity. Yet when the mind is always occupied, there is little opportunity to observe what is truly happening within. The deeper thoughts and insights that guide wise decisions require a calm environment to emerge. Imagine the surface of a lake during a storm. The water moves rapidly and the reflections on the surface become distorted. When the wind finally stops, the water slowly becomes still again, and suddenly the reflection of the sky becomes clear. The human mind works in the same way. When thoughts race constantly, it becomes difficult to see reality with clarity. But when the mind settles into stillness, your awareness sharpens. You begin noticing patterns and insights that were invisible while the mental storm was active. Let me share a story that illustrates the importance of silence. In a busy town, there lived a woman named Lucy who worked in an environment where conversation never seemed to stop. Her days were filled with meetings, messages, and urgent decisions that demanded quick responses. At first, she believed that constant activity was necessary for success. The faster she responded, the more productive she felt. Yet after several years, Lucy noticed something troubling. Despite her constant effort, she felt increasingly overwhelmed and uncertain about many of the choices she made. Her mind rarely had time to process anything deeply because another task always arrived before the previous one had fully settled. One weekend, Lucy visited a quiet countryside far from the city where her daily routines normally unfolded. The area was peaceful and surrounded by fields where the only sounds were wind moving through the grass and birds calling in the distance. During her first morning there, she sat alone on a wooden bench and noticed how unusual the silence felt. At first, her mind continued racing with thoughts about unfinished tasks and unanswered messages. But as the hours passed, something began to change. Without the usual noise, her thoughts gradually slowed. Her breathing became steady and her attention shifted from constant reaction to simple observation. In that silence, Lucy began recognizing ideas that had been hidden beneath the pressure of her routine. She realized that several projects she had been struggling with could be simplified in ways she had never considered before. She also noticed that many of the decisions that felt urgent in the office were actually less important than she had believed. The stillness gave her mind the space needed to separate what truly mattered from what merely demanded attention. When she returned to the city, she began creating small periods of quiet each day. And over time, those moments of silence helped her make clearer and more thoughtful decisions. In another place, there lived a craftsman named Arnold who had practiced the value of silence for most of his life. Arnold built delicate instruments from wood and metal, work that required patience and precise attention. Each morning before beginning his craft, he would sit quietly in his workshop without speaking or moving for several minutes. During that time, he allowed his thoughts to settle until his mind felt calm and focused. Only then would he begin working. The results of this habit became visible in the extraordinary quality of the instruments he created. Each piece carried a sense of balance and harmony that other craftsmen admired. Arnold often explained that the stillness before his work allowed him to hear the subtle details guiding each movement of his hands. These stories reveal that silence is not simply the absence of sound. It is a state where awareness becomes more powerful because it is no longer scattered in many directions. When you enter silence, your mind has the opportunity to process experiences more deeply. Ideas that once seemed confusing begin to organize themselves naturally. Emotional tension softens because the body is no longer reacting to constant stimulation. In this calm environment, intuition also becomes easier to hear because the quiet signals of inner guidance are not competing with noise. Practicing silence does not require retreating from the world completely. Even a few minutes each day can create a powerful shift in your mental state. You might begin by sitting quietly without speaking or looking at any devices. Focus on the rhythm of your breathing and allow your thoughts to pass without trying to control them. At first, the mind may continue producing many ideas and distractions. This is natural because the mind has been active for so long, but if you remain patient, the thoughts gradually slow and a deeper sense of calm begins to appear. As this calm becomes familiar, you may notice that decisions feel easier to make. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond with greater awareness. Conversations become more meaningful because you listen carefully rather than preparing your next reply. Creativity also grows stronger because silence provides the mental space where new ideas can emerge without interruption. Remember this carefully. Silence is not weakness, and it is not emptiness. It is a powerful environment where clarity, creativity, and inner wisdom can develop. When you allow moments of stillness to exist within your life, you create space for understanding that cannot appear in constant noise. The world may continue moving quickly around you, but within that movement you will carry a quiet center where insight and balance remain steady. And from that center you will begin to see life with a clarity that only silence can reveal. There is a realization that changes the way you look at every interaction in your life. At first, it may feel uncomfortable, but once you truly understand it, the world begins to make far more sense. The people you meet and the situations you experience often reflect something happening inside your own consciousness. In many ways, the world behaves like a mirror. It does not simply exist outside of you. It responds to the attitudes, expectations, and emotional patterns you carry within yourself. Most people believe that their reactions are caused entirely by what other people do. If someone speaks harshly, they feel hurt. If someone offers kindness, they feel appreciated. In this way, it seems that emotions are controlled by the behavior of others. But when you observe life more carefully, you begin noticing that different people can experience the same situation in completely different ways. One person may interpret a comment as criticism, while another hears it as helpful advice. The external event is the same, yet the internal interpretation creates a different experience. This reveals that the mirror of the world reflects the state of the mind observing it. Let me share a story that illustrates this idea. In a small town, there lived a woman named Martha who often found herself frustrated with the people around her. At work, she believed her colleagues were careless and uncooperative. In conversations with friends, she frequently noticed faults in their behavior. Even simple interactions in shops or public places seemed to confirm her belief that people were inconsiderate. Martha felt as though the world was filled with difficult personalities that made her life unnecessarily complicated. Each evening she returned home feeling irritated by the events of the day. What Martha did not realize was that her expectations had quietly shaped the way she interpreted every interaction. Because she believed others were careless, she paid close attention to every small mistake they made. When someone forgot a detail, she noticed it immediately. When a conversation felt slightly awkward, she interpreted it as disrespect. Over time, these observations reinforced her belief that people were difficult. The world seemed to confirm her expectations again and again, yet the reflection she was seeing in the mirror of life had been influenced by the attitude she carried into each moment. In another part of the same town, there lived a man named Elmer who encountered many of the same people Martha did. Elmer worked in the same office building and visited the same shops during his daily routine. Yet his experience of the town felt completely different. Elmer believed that most people were doing their best even when they made mistakes. Because of this belief, he paid attention to small gestures of cooperation and kindness. When someone forgot a detail, he assumed they were simply busy rather than careless. When a conversation felt uncertain, he responded with patience instead of frustration. Over time, the environment around Elmer began reflecting the tone he carried within himself. Colleagues often approached him for advice because they felt comfortable speaking with him. Shop owners greeted him warmly because their conversations with him were relaxed and friendly. The same town that appeared difficult to Martha felt supportive and welcoming to Elmer. The difference did not lie in the external world. It came from the inner expectations each person brought into their interactions. The mirror of life reflected those expectations with surprising accuracy. This principle becomes even clearer when you observe your own reactions during moments of conflict. When someone speaks with anger, your immediate response may be to defend yourself or respond with equal intensity. That reaction often escalates the situation because the emotional energy on both sides continues growing. But if you respond with calm curiosity, the tone of the conversation can shift quickly. The same person who seemed aggressive a moment earlier may soften once they feel heard rather than opposed. Your inner state changes the reflection you receive from the person in front of you. Understanding the world as a mirror does not mean blaming yourself for every difficulty that appears in your life. Other people still make their own choices, and circumstances can sometimes be challenging. The deeper meaning of this principle is that your perception and expectations influence how those situations unfold. When you approach life with suspicion and tension, you often receive responses that confirm those feelings. When you approach life with openness and patience, you invite a different type of interaction. The mirror reflects what is most consistently present within you. This awareness can be powerful because it shifts your attention from trying to control other people toward understanding your own inner state. Instead of asking why others behave in certain ways, you begin asking what expectations you are carrying into each encounter. Are you expecting conflict or cooperation? Are you assuming rejection or connection? These subtle expectations influence your tone of voice, your body language, and the energy you bring into the conversation. Others respond to that energy even when they cannot clearly explain why. As you practice observing these patterns, you begin noticing how often the world mirrors your internal assumptions. A day that begins with irritation tends to produce more frustrating interactions. A day that begins with patience often unfolds with greater harmony. This does not mean every moment will be perfect, but it shows how your inner state contributes to the overall direction of your experiences. Gradually, you begin using the mirror of the world as a tool for self-awareness. When a reaction from someone else feels particularly strong, you can pause and reflect on what it might be revealing about your own expectations or emotions. Instead of seeing the interaction only as a problem, you recognize it as feedback about the state you are carrying within. This perspective allows you to grow because every reflection becomes an opportunity to understand yourself more clearly. Remember this carefully. The world around you often reflects the tone of your inner life. When you cultivate patience, kindness, and understanding those qualities begin appearing more frequently in your experiences. The mirror of life does not judge you or punish you. It simply reveals what is present within your awareness. When you recognize this reflection, you gain the ability to shape your interactions in more conscious ways. And as your inner state evolves, the reflection you see in the world gradually changes as well, showing you a reality that mirrors the growth you have created within yourself. There is a powerful shift that happens when you stop living only from your past and begin living from the person you are becoming. Most people allow their history to define their identity. They think about what they have done, what mistakes they have made, and what limitations they have experienced. And they quietly assume that the future will resemble the past. In this way, yesterday becomes the blueprint for tomorrow. But there is another way to move through life. Instead of acting from who you have been, you can begin acting from who you intend to become. This idea may sound simple, yet it changes the direction of your life in profound ways. Your identity shapes your behavior far more than temporary motivation ever could. When you believe you are a certain type of person, your actions begin aligning with that belief automatically. If you see yourself as someone who struggles, your decisions will often reflect caution and hesitation. If you see yourself as someone capable of growth, your behavior gradually moves toward learning and expansion. The identity you hold within your mind becomes the starting point for the actions you take in the world. Let me share a story that illustrates this principle clearly. In a quiet neighborhood, there lived a woman named Goldie, who often spoke about how difficult life had been for her. She had experienced several disappointments in the past, and those memories became the foundation of how she saw herself. Whenever new opportunities appeared, she quickly reminded herself that things rarely worked out in her favor. Because of this belief, she approached each situation with doubt. When challenges appeared, she interpreted them as proof that her expectations were correct. Over time, her life began repeating the same patterns because she was making decisions from the identity formed by her past experiences. Not far away lived a man named Vernon, whose circumstances had once been similar to Goldie's. Vernon had also faced setbacks and uncertainty. Yet at some point he realized that his past did not have to define the person he would become. Instead of asking what had happened before, he began asking what kind of person he wanted to grow into. He imagined a future version of himself who was confident, disciplined, and open to learning. That image became the reference point for his daily decisions. When Vernon woke in the morning, he asked himself how that future version of himself would approach the day. Would he avoid difficult tasks or face them with patience? Would he give up after a mistake or learn from it and continue forward? These questions slowly changed the way Vernon behaved. He began practicing habits that reflected the identity he was building rather than the identity shaped by his past. At first, the changes felt small, but over time they created a powerful shift in his life. People around Vernon noticed that he carried a different kind of energy. Instead of dwelling on past disappointments, he spoke about possibilities and ideas for the future. When challenges appeared, he treated them as part of the journey rather than as signs of defeat. Opportunities began appearing because his actions and attitude invited them. What looked like sudden progress from the outside was actually the result of a steady commitment to living from the perspective of the person he was becoming. This principle works because the mind responds strongly to identity. When you consistently imagine yourself as a certain type of person, your brain begins organizing your behavior around that idea. The choices you make start reflecting the qualities you believe you possess. Over time, these repeated actions reinforce the identity until it feels natural. In this way, the future self you once imagined gradually becomes the person you are living as each day. Many people wait for external success before allowing themselves to feel confident or capable. They believe they must first achieve a result and then their identity will change. But the deeper pattern works in reverse. Identity usually changes first, and the results follow afterward. When you begin seeing yourself as disciplined, you start practicing discipline. When you see yourself as creative, you allow your ideas to take shape without hesitation. The actions that produce success begin with the identity you choose to embody. Living from your future self does not mean pretending to be someone you are not. It means recognizing that you are constantly evolving and choosing the direction of that evolution intentionally. Instead of repeating the patterns that shaped your past, you begin asking which habits, thoughts, and attitudes belong to the person you are becoming. Each day becomes an opportunity to practice that identity through small but meaningful actions. You may still encounter moments of doubt or uncertainty during this process. Growth rarely happens without challenges. Yet when you return to the image of the future self you are building, those moments lose their power to define you. They become temporary obstacles rather than permanent labels. You continue moving forward because your identity is no longer tied to what happened before. It is connected to the direction you have chosen to move toward. Over time, this shift in perspective creates a remarkable transformation. Decisions become clearer because they are guided by the values of the person you intend to become. Habits become stronger because they align with a meaningful identity. Opportunities appear more visible because your attention is focused on growth rather than limitation. The future that once existed only as an idea gradually takes form in your daily life. Remember this carefully. The person you will become tomorrow begins with the identity you choose to embody today. When you stop allowing your past to dictate your actions and begin living from the perspective of your future self, your entire approach to life changes. Each decision becomes part of the process of shaping that identity. And as those decisions accumulate, you begin discovering that the future you imagined is no longer distant. It is unfolding through the choices you make in the present moment. There is an important balance that many people struggle to understand while pursuing growth and success. Some people believe that constant action is the only path to achievement. They push themselves to work harder, move faster, and control every detail of their progress. Others take the opposite approach and focus only on inner peace or positive thinking while avoiding meaningful effort. Both approaches miss something essential. True progress happens when action and inner alignment work together. It is the balance between doing and being that allows life to unfold with both clarity and effectiveness. Many people fall into the habit of believing that success comes only from relentless effort. They wake up each day already feeling the pressure to accomplish more than the day before. Their thoughts revolve around tasks, deadlines, and expectations. For a time, this intense effort may produce visible results, but eventually exhaustion begins to appear. When the mind is constantly pushing forward without inner stability, it becomes overwhelmed. Decisions grow rushed, creativity fades, and even meaningful work can begin to feel like a burden. Action without inner balance eventually creates resistance rather than progress. Imagine a river flowing through a wide valley. When the current moves naturally, the water travels smoothly around stones and bends in the land. But when a barrier blocks the flow, the water becomes turbulent and chaotic. Human effort works in a similar way. When your actions arise from a calm and clear inner state, they move forward like the steady current of the river. When your actions come from tension or desperation, they create unnecessary struggle. The difference is not in how much effort you apply, but in the state of mind from which that effort emerges. Let me share a story about a woman named Flora, who once believed that success required constant activity. Flora worked in a creative industry where new ideas were always expected. She filled her schedule with endless tasks, meetings, and late nights trying to keep up with the pace of her work. At first, her determination impressed everyone around her. Yet after some time, she noticed that her ideas were becoming repetitive and uninspired. The more she pushed herself, the less creativity she seemed to have. Her mind was so crowded with pressure that there was no space left for fresh inspiration. One afternoon, Flora stepped away from her office and walked through a quiet park nearby. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to sit without planning the next task. As she watched the trees moving gently in the wind, her thoughts slowly settled. In that stillness, an idea appeared that had been hidden beneath her constant effort. It was a simple concept for a project she had been struggling with for months. The moment surprised her because the solution had not appeared while she was working harder. It appeared when she allowed herself to pause. Flora realized that creativity required not only effort but also moments of presence and openness. In another town, there lived a craftsman named Chester who understood this balance from years of experience. Chester built furniture using traditional methods that required patience and careful attention. Each morning before beginning his work, he spent a few minutes standing quietly in his workshop. During this time, he observed the tools around him and allowed his mind to settle into a calm rhythm. Only after this moment of stillness did he begin shaping the wood. His movements were steady and precise because they came from a state of focused presence rather than urgency. People often wondered why Chester's work carried such a sense of harmony. The answer was not only his skill with tools, it was the balance he maintained between action and being. When he worked, He gave his full attention to each movement. Yet he never allowed pressure to replace clarity. If frustration appeared, he paused rather than forcing the next step. By respecting this balance, he preserved the quality of both his craft and his state of mind. These stories reveal an important truth. Action becomes powerful when it arises from alignment rather than anxiety. When your mind is calm and focused, your actions naturally become more effective. You notice opportunities more clearly and respond with thoughtful decisions instead of impulsive reactions. Effort becomes purposeful rather than exhausting because it is guided by clarity. In this way, presence enhances action rather than replacing it. Balance also means recognizing that rest and reflection are not signs of weakness. They are essential parts of sustained growth, just as a field must remain quiet for a season before it produces another harvest. The human mind requires moments of stillness to restore creativity and insight. When you allow yourself these moments, you return to your work with renewed energy and perspective. The challenge for many people is learning to trust this rhythm. Society often praises constant activity while overlooking the value of reflection. Yet some of the most meaningful breakthroughs in science, art, and leadership have appeared during moments of quiet awareness rather than during periods of frantic effort. When the mind is calm, it can see connections that remain hidden during constant motion. Balancing action and being also helps you remain grounded during success and resilient during difficulty. When results are positive, you appreciate them without becoming dependent on constant achievement. When challenges appear, you respond with patience rather than panic, because your sense of stability comes from within rather than from external outcomes alone. This inner steadiness allows your actions to remain thoughtful even in uncertain situations. Remember this carefully. Your life does not need to be driven by endless effort or passive waiting. The most effective path is the one where action and presence support each other. When you cultivate a calm inner state, your actions gain clarity and purpose. When you take meaningful action, your inner confidence grows stronger. Together, these two forces create a rhythm that allows progress to unfold naturally. And in that balance, you discover that life does not require constant struggle to move forward. It requires awareness, intention, and the wisdom to know when to act and when to simply be present with the moment before you. There is a rhythm moving quietly beneath everything that happens in your life. It is not always visible, and it rarely follows the schedules you try to create. Yet this rhythm shapes the timing of many events that unfold around you. Some opportunities appear quickly, while others take years to develop. Some answers arrive when you least expect them. This pattern is often described as divine timing. The understanding that certain things come into your life only when the moment is ready. Most people struggle with this idea because the human mind prefers control and immediate results. When you desire something strongly, you want to see evidence as soon as possible. If the result does not appear quickly, the mind begins to doubt the possibility altogether. Impatience grows, and the desire to force an outcome becomes stronger. Yet life rarely responds well to pressure. Just as a seed cannot be rushed to grow before its season arrives, many experiences require the right conditions before they can unfold fully. Imagine a farmer planting seeds in a field during early spring. The moment the seeds enter the soil, the process of growth begins. Yet nothing appears on the surface immediately. If the farmer returned the next morning expecting to see a full harvest, he would feel disappointed. Growth requires time, sunlight, water, and patience. The same principle applies to the intentions you hold within your life. Once a vision is planted in your mind, the process of creation begins, but the visible result may take time to emerge. Let me share a story about a woman named Hattie who learned this lesson through experience. Hattie was an ambitious entrepreneur who dreamed of building a successful company. She possessed strong ideas and worked tirelessly to turn those ideas into reality. Every day she measured her progress and expected immediate results. When obstacles appeared, she reacted with frustration and tried to push even harder. Her mind believed that success could be forced through constant pressure. Months passed and the business moved forward slowly, but Hattie felt increasingly impatient. She compared her progress with others and worried that she was falling behind. The more she focused on speed, the more tension she created in her work. Decisions became rushed and mistakes began appearing. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, she sat quietly in her office long after everyone else had left. For the first time, she allowed herself to stop pushing and simply reflect on the journey so far. In that quiet moment, she realized that her constant urgency had been working against her. Instead of allowing ideas to develop naturally, she had been trying to force every step before it was ready. Over the following months, Hattie began changing her approach. She still worked with dedication, but she also allowed time for reflection and patience. She focused on building strong relationships and improving the foundation of her company rather than demanding immediate expansion. Slowly, the pieces began aligning. Partnerships formed at the right moment and opportunities appeared that she could not have predicted earlier. What once felt like slow progress turned out to be the preparation necessary for lasting growth. In another town, there lived a man named Wilbur who had experienced a similar lesson in a different way. Wilbur dreamed of becoming a writer, yet for many years his work remained private and unpublished. Friends often asked why he continued writing when recognition seemed so distant. Wilbur would simply smile and say that stories need time to grow. Instead of forcing attention, he focused on improving his craft and observing life carefully. Years passed before one of his stories was finally noticed by a publisher. When the book was released, readers responded with enthusiasm because the depth of his writing reflected years of thoughtful observation. People who discovered his work often believed his success appeared suddenly. They did not see the quiet seasons of preparation that had shaped the moment when opportunity finally arrived. Wilbur understood that the timing of his work had unfolded naturally because he allowed the process to mature rather than forcing recognition too soon. These stories reveal an important truth about timing. Effort is necessary, but patience allows effort to bear fruit. When you plant a vision within your life, there is often a period where the results remain unseen. During this time, it may appear as though nothing is happening. Yet beneath the surface, many small elements are aligning. Skills are developing, relationships are forming, and circumstances are shifting in ways that will support the moment when the result finally appears. Understanding divine timing does not mean waiting passively for life to change. It means continuing to act with intention while trusting that the outcome will appear when the conditions are ready. You focus on what you can nurture today rather than worrying about how quickly the future will arrive. This mindset allows your actions to remain steady instead of rushed by anxiety. When you learn to respect this rhythm, your relationship with time changes. Instead of feeling pressure to achieve everything immediately, you recognize that each stage of growth has its purpose. Early stages build the foundation. Middle stages refine your understanding. Later stages reveal the results of what has been patiently cultivated. Every moment contributes to the process, even when the progress is not immediately visible. Remember this carefully. Life unfolds through seasons, not through constant urgency. When you plant a meaningful intention, your responsibility is to care for it with patience and dedication. The exact moment when it blossoms may not follow your expectations, but when it arrives, you will often realize that the timing was more precise than you could have planned. Divine timing is not about delay. It is about alignment. When the inner preparation and the outer circumstances meet at the right moment, the results appear naturally, and you understand that what once felt like waiting was actually the quiet process of becoming ready for what was always meant to unfold. There is a force that moves quietly beneath all human experience. It does not demand attention the way ambition or fear often does, yet it holds the power to transform the way people live and interact with one another. That force is love expressed through compassion. When people hear the word love, they often think only of romantic relationships, yet the deeper meaning of love extends far beyond that. Love in its truest form is the ability to see the humanity in others and respond with understanding rather than judgment. Compassion is the action that grows from that understanding. Together they create one of the most powerful energies shaping the world around you. Many people move through life protecting themselves from disappointment. They build emotional walls because past experiences have taught them that vulnerability can lead to pain. While these defenses may feel safe, they often prevent genuine connection from forming. When the mind focuses on protecting itself, it begins to interpret the behavior of others with suspicion. Small misunderstandings grow larger, and simple interactions become tense. Over time, life begins to feel isolated even when surrounded by people. Compassion has the power to dissolve these barriers because it replaces judgment with curiosity about the experiences of others. Let me share a story about a woman named Pearl who lived in a busy city where people rarely slowed down long enough to notice each other. Pearl worked in an office where tension often filled the room. Colleagues criticized one another's work and disagreements frequently turned into arguments. At first, Pearl reacted in the same way as everyone else. When someone spoke harshly, she responded with equal frustration. The atmosphere in the office grew heavier each day because every reaction added more conflict to the environment. One afternoon, Pearl noticed something that changed her perspective. A co-worker who had often been impatient and critical seemed unusually quiet during a meeting. Afterward, Pearl discovered that the co-worker had recently experienced a serious family difficulty. The realization shifted something inside her. Instead of seeing the harsh behavior as personal hostility, she began recognizing that many people carry struggles that remain invisible to others. The next time tension appeared in the office, Pearl responded differently. Instead of reacting with anger, she listened carefully and spoke with calm understanding. At first, her response surprised the people around her. They expected the usual pattern of conflict. Yet her patience gradually influenced the atmosphere of the workplace. When others noticed that she responded with respect rather than judgment, they began softening their own reactions as well. Conversations that once escalated into arguments became opportunities to solve problems together. Pearl discovered that compassion could quietly transform the energy of an entire environment without requiring force or authority. In another part of the same city lived a shop owner named Norman, who experienced a similar transformation. Norman had once been fiercely competitive in his business. He watched the success of nearby shops with envy and often spoke critically about their products. This mindset created constant tension because he saw every neighbor as a rival. One day, a fire damaged one of the neighboring stores. As Norman watched the owner struggling to recover, he felt an unexpected sense of empathy. Instead of viewing the situation as an advantage, he offered help with repairs and temporary space to store merchandise. The experience changed the relationship between the two shop owners completely. The neighbor later returned the kindness by recommending Norman's store to customers and helping him during busy seasons. What began as an act of compassion created a partnership that benefited both businesses. Norman realized that the generosity he once believed would weaken his position had actually strengthened his community and his own sense of fulfillment. These stories reveal an important truth about compassion. It shifts the focus of your attention from defending yourself to understanding others. When you approach life with empathy, you begin noticing the shared experiences that connect people rather than the differences that separate them. This perspective naturally softens the emotional tension that often arises in relationships. Compassion does not remove every conflict, but it transforms the way those conflicts are handled. Instead of escalating anger, you create space for dialogue and resolution. Love expressed through compassion also changes the way you experience your own life. When your thoughts revolve around judgment or resentment, your mind remains locked in a cycle of negative emotion. Compassion interrupts that cycle by introducing understanding. Even when someone behaves poorly, you recognize that their actions may come from fear, stress, or pain rather than deliberate harm. This realization allows you to respond with clarity rather than reacting impulsively. Over time, your inner state becomes calmer because you are no longer carrying the weight of constant hostility. Another powerful aspect of compassion is its ability to create connection. Human beings naturally respond to genuine care. When people feel respected and understood, they are more willing to cooperate and communicate openly. This creates stronger relationships in families, workplaces, and communities. Opportunities for collaboration appear because trust replaces suspicion. The simple act of treating others with empathy often leads to support and goodwill that cannot be forced through competition alone. Compassion also reminds you that every person is navigating their own challenges. Just as you carry memories, hopes, and fears, the people around you carry their own unseen stories. Recognizing this shared human experience encourages patience and kindness even during difficult moments. It allows you to see beyond a single action and understand the broader context of someone's life. This awareness deepens your relationships and strengthens your ability to communicate honestly. Remember this carefully. Love and compassion are not signs of weakness. They are forms of strength that require awareness and courage. When you respond to the world with empathy, you transform the energy of your interactions and often influence the people around you in positive ways. Compassion creates connection where conflict once existed and understanding where judgment once stood. As this way of living becomes part of your daily life, you begin to see that the most meaningful changes in the world, rarely come from force alone. They emerge from the quiet power of people who choose to treat one another with respect, patience, and genuine care. There is a moment in every journey of awareness when a person begins to realize that the search they have been following was never leading somewhere outside of themselves. Throughout life, many people believe they must chase success, happiness, wisdom, or fulfillment, as if these things exist somewhere far away, waiting to be discovered. They imagine that one day, after enough effort and experience, they will finally reach a place where everything feels complete. Yet the deeper truth slowly reveals something surprising. What you have been searching for has never been separate from you. It has always existed within your own consciousness, waiting for you to recognize it. The journey through understanding thoughts, emotions, belief, imagination, patience, compassion, and awareness eventually leads back to a simple realization: you were never truly incomplete. What felt like emptiness or lack was often the result of forgetting the deeper connection between your inner world and the life unfolding around you. When that connection becomes clear again, the search begins to quiet down. You stop chasing meaning in distant places and begin recognizing it in the present moment. Let me share a story that illustrates this realization. In a quiet village surrounded by mountains, there lived a woman named Vera, who spent many years traveling from place to place seeking answers about life. She visited teachers, read countless books, and attended gatherings where people spoke about enlightenment and purpose. Each time she learned something new, she felt hopeful that she was getting closer to the truth. Yet after every journey, she returned home with the same feeling that something was still missing. The knowledge she collected felt valuable, but it never created the lasting peace she hoped to find. One evening, after returning from another long trip, Vera sat alone outside her home, watching the sunset move slowly across the mountains. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to stop searching for a moment. Instead of analyzing her thoughts, she simply observed the quiet beauty around her. The sky changed colors as the sun disappeared, and a gentle breeze moved through the trees. In that stillness, she realized something she had overlooked during all her travels. The peace she had been seeking in distant places was already present in that simple moment. It had been there every day, waiting for her attention. Not far from Vera's village, there lived a man named Delbert who had never traveled far from his home. Delbert worked as a gardener and spent most of his days caring for the plants that grew in the fields around the village. His life was simple, yet people often noticed a calm presence in the way he spoke and moved. When someone once asked him why he seemed so peaceful, he smiled and pointed toward the garden he was tending. He explained that every seed already contains the life it needs to grow. The soil, water, and sunlight simply allow that life to appear. Human beings are similar. The qualities they search for often already exist within them, waiting to be recognized and nurtured. The stories of Vera and Delbert reveal an important truth about the nature of wholeness. The feeling of completeness does not arrive because life suddenly becomes perfect. It appears when you recognize that your awareness itself is the space where life unfolds. Thoughts, emotions, and experiences move through that awareness like clouds passing through the sky. When you identify completely with each passing cloud, you may feel lost or overwhelmed. But when you remember that you are the open sky behind those clouds, a sense of stability begins to return. Returning to wholeness means understanding that your identity is not limited to the roles or labels you have collected throughout life. You may be a parent, a friend, a worker, or a student. But beneath these roles, there is a deeper presence that remains constant. This presence is the awareness observing each moment of experience. When you reconnect with that awareness, the endless pressure to prove your worth begins to fade. You realize that your value does not depend entirely on achievements or approval from others. It exists naturally as part of your being. This realization does not remove the responsibilities of daily life. You still make decisions, pursue goals, and navigate challenges. The difference is that these actions arise from a place of balance rather than from the feeling that something is missing inside you. When you feel whole within yourself, your efforts become expressions of creativity and curiosity instead of desperate attempts to fill an inner void. Many people describe this state as coming home to themselves. The mind becomes quieter because it no longer feels the need to search constantly for validation or certainty. Instead of worrying about every outcome, you develop trust in the natural flow of life. This trust allows you to respond to situations with clarity and patience. Even when difficulties appear, you recognize that they are temporary experiences rather than definitions of who you are. Compassion also deepens when you return to this sense of wholeness. Because you no longer feel incomplete, you are less driven by comparison or competition. You begin appreciating the uniqueness of other people without feeling threatened by their success. Relationships become more authentic because they are based on connection rather than on the need for approval. In this way, personal wholeness naturally extends into the way you treat others and the world around you. Remember this carefully. The journey of growth does not end with the discovery of some distant truth. It ends with the recognition that the awareness experiencing this moment is already complete. The wisdom you searched for in many places gradually reveals itself within the quiet presence of your own consciousness. When you allow yourself to rest in that awareness, the sense of separation fades, and life begins to feel more integrated and meaningful. Returning to wholeness is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering the deeper nature that has always been part of you. As this realization settles within your life, the endless search for fulfillment slowly transforms into a quiet appreciation of the present moment. And in that moment, you may discover that the peace you once imagined was waiting at the end of a long journey has been here with you all along, patiently waiting for you to recognize it.